Hey guys, thanks for joining me for episode number 72 of Buy Black Podcast. Before we jump into today's show, I wanted to give you guys a quick update. As I've been working on building the Dope Business Plan program, I recognized that a lot of the people that I've talked to through the show and a lot of the other business owners and entrepreneurs I've talked to over the last couple of years have had a lot of the same problem. They get into owning and running their business and they get overwhelmed, they get stuck and alone doing everything in the business, and they never actually get a chance to step away and start growing and running their business. And so because of that, I've actually built a free assessment called From Self-Employed to CEO, How Close Are You? That's going to help small business owners step back and take a look and just take inventory and say, how many of the structural things do I have in place that are going to let me step away from doing all of this work so that I can leave the business, grow the business, and spend my quality time with my family and enjoying time away from the business the way that a business owner wants to and is supposed to. And so to kick off that assessment, I'm actually going to be doing a free training event later on this month. I've got one scheduled for January 23rd and then an encore for January 26th for people who can't make it during the week. If you are interested in being a part of that free training event, I would love for you to reach out to me and sign up. To do that, you just need to go to dopebusinessplan.com/IWantIn, and you can get registered for this free training event that's going to walk you through the basics of the assessment and help you start identifying some of those gaps that keep you held hostage in your business instead of being able to step away and take care of growing your business. And more importantly, step away from doing all the work in your business so you can get some time off, some time with your family, and still be making money. So that's what this is all about. Again, it is dopebusinessplan.com/IWantIn to get your seat in this free training event that I have going on Wednesday the 23rd and an encore for folks who can't make it on Saturday the 26th. I hope to see you there. And yeah, let's start the show.
You want to interview your buyers just the same way they're interviewing you. You want to interview them and ask them the questions like, if I want to wholesale, would you be interested in that property? If I wanted to fix and flip, would you be interested in the property? If I wanted to buy and hold, would you finance me, let's say hypothetically, buy and hold for 5 years? Because if you're buying a house, and I'll just use Baltimore again, you buy the house for 30, you really don't need a 30-year loan. You can pay that off in a significant amount of time based on what your average rent is to the tenant.
Buy Black Podcast, episode 72. Purchase your first real estate investment property with Roxanne Little. Welcome to Buy Black, the voice of Black business. The only podcast that provides free marketing for growing Black companies, education for budding entrepreneurs, and a reliable place for consumers to find and spend money in quality Black-owned businesses. I'm your host, Gerald Jones, and if you learned something from this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating or review on iTunes. Ready? Let's get to work. Hey everybody, welcome back to Buy Black Podcast, the voice of Black business. Your only podcast dedicated to helping you find and connect with Black business owners, such as my guest today, Roxanne Little. She is the CEO of Half Car Solutions Real Estate Company, and she is also a brand new author of a children's book that is phenomenal. I read the manuscript yesterday, and today we are going to be talking about both of those things, how you can invest in your first real estate properties, and we are going to go through a little conversation about the book that Roxanne has coming out soon. And Roxanne, thank you for joining me for the episode today.
Thank you for having me.
So I don't want to waste a bunch of time running my mouth. I want to get right into asking you the questions. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, and this book that you have written for your daughter.
Well, good night, everyone. My name is Roxanne Little. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I migrated to the United States, and throughout my migration, I joined the United States Marine Corps. After the Marine Corps, I currently work for the federal government. However, I wanted more than just working for somebody. I wanted to work for myself. So in my spare time, I liked writing, and as well as I wanted to invest in myself and created a business. And real estate is properties that I do own. So I started investing in real estate. First, I started as a landlord, and now I'm a fix and flip as well as a wholesaler.
So you were just all over it when it comes to the real estate. I love it. We are not going to move forward without jumping back here to this conversation about the Marine Corps. So as we had our pre-interview and I found out that you had been in the Marines, I got excited because I'm a fellow devil dog myself. So what was it that drew you to the Marine Corps when you immigrated and came over? And what was that experience like for you?
What gravitated me to Marine Corps is like while I was sitting in the debt, I watched every service member walk by in their uniform, and the Marine Corps had the crispest uniform I've ever seen. And I said I wanted to join that branch.
Wow. How'd that turn out for you?
It turned out really well. I had a great 8 years. It was the best 8 years of my life. I learned a lot, and I am very grateful for that opportunity.
Golden. So with that, let's talk about your, I guess, the path to this particular book. You told me before that you wrote this book. It's called The Choice, and you wrote it for your daughter. As I was reading it yesterday, there is just so much wisdom and spirituality in this book. It seems like something that was very pointed towards a particular need that your daughter had at the time that you wrote it. I just want to hear that story. How did we get there?
Well, what happened is my younger daughter struggled with reading. So what I noticed is that she couldn't pronounce big words, because I would ask her to sit there and read a page. And when I asked her to read a page, she just clammed up. So what I started doing was just jotting stuff down on a piece of paper and asking her to read it to me. And then she felt more comfortable. So I made it a little bit more fun. Like I started writing, then we did a little bit of drawings. So it was write and draw. So I decided that, I wanted to write a children's book to help her. So when I wrote the book, she loved it. She could read every word. She didn't have any problem at all reading it. And now she loves reading.
Oh, wow. Okay. So in the book itself, it's like I said, it's very spiritually focused. How did you come to that particular story? Like, is there a story behind the story?
It is a story behind the story. So my daughter was struggling with reading while I was dealing with my own issues at work, where I had a boss that kept, lack of a better word, attacking my integrity. So while I was dealing with trying to help my daughter, I also had to deal with my own struggles. And one of the things that my mom taught me as a little girl, that if you have a problem, you need to pray. So that was one of the things that led me to write this book, because, I take my daughter to church with me every Sunday, and she's never really interested, but, just getting her there was just the blessing in itself, just having her go.
Right. Okay. And so as I read the book and I read the story of the book, it touched me a lot, because how much are you comfortable with me going into what's inside the book before we get into that?
You could dive right in, and
okay, I love it. So the story itself of a little girl who is growing up in an orphanage and sees other children being chosen every day for years. Just that in and of itself is an experience that I know a lot of children in not just our nation, but all over the world work through and deal with. What made you decide to craft a story around that storyline?
It's gonna be, most people may not believe, but I literally got this story out of a dream. I actually had the dream, the premonition, everything came in the dream. Right after I had the dream, I woke up and I literally typed the book in 3 hours.
Wow. That's a lot of writing. It's a really cool story. This girl, she spends her entire life inside of the orphanage, and then as she's coming up on her teen years, there's only a few kids left, and take it from there. What choice does she make? What direction does she go when there's only a few kids left and the families are coming to try to decide who they're going to adopt?
Well, what I like about the story is that Mrs. Johnson, who owned the orphanage, really instilled in the kids the importance of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And in her doing that, she realized, I guess, Rachel had the hardest struggle because she had her there since she was a baby. So it's almost like she took Rachel under her wing to let her know that, baby, don't worry. The time's going to come. You're going to be adopted by the right family. Just trust in God. He will guide your way. And even though she heard it all the time, even though she probably felt that and knew he was there, it didn't matter because she's at the end result, another child was adopted
Mm-hmm.
and still there.
Right.
Hurt, the pain, the anger, just not understanding why her mother left her there. It was just every emotion you could think of as a child and adult. I think anybody can relate.
Yeah. I definitely related to it. And what I also liked was near the end, as these families come to adopt the kids, there was a lot of faith and wisdom in the way that she handled interacting with these families. I mean, to tell a family, hey, if you want me, are you willing to take the rest of my family, these other children that I've spent my entire life with? As much as I want to get adopted, as much as I want a home, I want to be with them more. Talk about that, because that really jumped out to me.
Well, I just noticed that, and I don't know how the story came about as an orphanage. It just so happened that what my daughter was experiencing and what I was experiencing and what I knew to do, which was to trust God, that is how this story all came about. It's very hard to describe that. I think in the end, we as adults or even children, you want to be with someone that you're familiar with. You want to be with someone that you know you love. And growing up with these kids, that was her everything. Even though we know in the story that they made fun of her, she knew that they were her family. No matter what, they were always there. For the 12 years she was there, they knew that, that was the opportunity, and that's all she wanted, was to be with her family.
Yeah. And just all of that tying in at the end of it saying, hey, as much as I want to be adopted, I want to make sure that they're taken care of too, right? I don't want to leave here if they're stuck behind, and I don't want to be somewhere that they are not, even though, they have made fun of me or things like that. So it's just a really powerful story. So before we actually dig into talking about the real estate, I want to find out from you what's next with this story, what's next with the book, and how can people get their hands on the book, whether it's out now or is it coming soon? What do we do?
It's currently out now. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's on Amazon, paperback, and we just did the Kindle version. So if you have a Kindle Unlimited, you can actually read it right now for free. We're also in the process of turning it into the Audible. So for those kids who like to actually listen to books now instead of reading, you can get it in the Audible. And the next book, which is coming out soon in September, it's actually going to be titled Rachel's Journey. So it's going to go into more about after she was adopted, what she's gone through after the adoption, being adopted with the kids, being with a new family, and her journey through those stages in life.
I love it. That is going to be a great follow-up. Now, this book you wrote under a pen name. That pen name is Hazel Walcott, Walcott.
Yes, Walcott.
Okay, Walcott. And so if someone is searching, whether Barnes & Noble, Amazon, they're looking for Hazel Walcott and they're looking for The Choice, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so once we put this show out, I'm going to make sure that we have links to both of those, to Barnes & Noble and Amazon, in the show notes. But for those of you who are actively listening to the show and watching right now, I'm going to kind of break the third or fourth wall or whatever you want to call it, because I'm going to go ahead and find it and then put a link into the chat before we move on, if that's cool. Doot. There it is. And there's a link. Copy that link. Put it in the chat. And guess what? If people want to buy the book, there is your link. That is how you can go and get it if you are watching the show live now. But I want to flip gears, and we are going to start talking about the major focus of this show today. As we were talking about your book in the pre-interview, you let it slip that you have recently started working a real estate company. And I'll tell you, I've had one show before that was about real estate. It is within our top 3 most downloaded shows because everybody wants to know how to do it. And if they're like me, they're tired of these gurus coming through and saying, hey, if you just pay me, $80,000, I'll show you how to do everything, right? We want to hear from real people who've done it before and can give real advice. And that is something I would love to talk about with you. So talk to me a little bit about your journey into real estate. How did we get started with that?
Well, back in 2014, I actually bought my very first house. I was super psyched and excited. And then I actually met my husband because I lived in Montgomery County. So, and he lived in Annapolis. So my choice was either stay in Montgomery County or move to Annapolis. So we moved to Annapolis. So I had to do something with my house. So in talking to my realtor, she said, Roxanne, don't sell it. Hold on to it. Be a landlord. Because I was like, well, I don't want to be a landlord because there's a lot of headaches, all these challenges, constantly have to fix things. And I live, in Annapolis now, which is, probably a good 20 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, well, don't worry. I can find you a good property manager and they can manage the property for you. So I was like, okay. So, I took my realtor's advice, turned it into a landlord-tenant property. And I've had the best tenants. The tenants are still there. And in talking to her, I was like, I want to do this more, but I don't know if I wanted to do the landlord piece of it anymore. I wanted to kind of get into more properties, owning more properties, fixing properties, wholesaling properties, stuff like that, and, she put me on and she was like, well, there's a seminar coming into town. She's like, you should go check it out. So, I went out, checked out the seminar. It was really good information. I am one of those that paid that $20,000 that everybody is so scared to pay. I did spend that money, and I will say it was my best $20,000 investment. Yes, the gurus are in another state, but I talk to my mentors almost every day. I have 4 properties right now that are currently being rehabbed. And I'm also looking for other properties that I can wholesale. So it has been worth the investment.
I love it. And we talked about that before, that the fact that investing in yourself was the best thing that you could have done. I think a lot of us, we get wary of all the people who come through and say, I've got the answer to your problem. Just give me your money, right? And it takes real people who've been through it to say, no, this is a good one. I can vouch for this. It was a great value. I still get contact with the folks who I gave that money to when they're still helping me. That's a great piece of information to have, because we're not anti-consultant. I'm a consultant, right? But you want to make sure that you're spending your money with people who are delivering back that value. So before I move into the next question, I want to go back to the folks who are in the chat. If you are listening right now and you have questions about starting in real estate, if you are looking to grow your real estate portfolio, if you're looking to switch from being a landlord to doing fix and flips or getting into wholesaling, we're going to be talking about those different things today. But I want you to drop your questions into the chat so that we can ask and answer them in real time. So that being said, I want to back up real quick and just merge on some terminology. You said you started out as a landlord, then you started doing fix and flips, now you're doing wholesaling, and these words make sense to me. They may not make sense to everybody. So talk to us about the differences among those three types of ways of getting into real estate.
Well, with the landlord is, as you know it, you go to the bank, you get a mortgage, you pay either 2 or 4% interest rate, and you do a 30-year loan. That is pretty much you purchasing the house. The fix and flip is actually you using your own collateral, which is whatever collateral you have. Let's say you're buying a house, and I'll just use Baltimore because that's where we are right now, which is in Baltimore. You purchase a house, let's say for $50,000, and your rehab is $30,000, and your ARV, which is your after repair value, is $150,000. That's a good deal. That is what fixing and flipping is. You basically buy a house that needs some TLC, and you put it back on the market for a homeowner to purchase. Wholesaling is where you find a property and you have your buyers list, which is individuals that you contact when you have properties that you know that they like, that you know they're interested in the area, and you know it's their sweet spot. You give them a call, say you purchased a property, let's say you're going to buy it for $5,000 and you sell it to them for $10,000 and you make a $5,000 profit. That's wholesaling.
Okay, so those three very different ways to do this thing, right? What made you want to move from being a landlord into doing the fix and flip? Because the fix part of that is what scares me. I get this house that needs some TLC, and that means that I gotta give it that TLC, which is time, that's money, that's getting my hands dirty, right? So what's the draw for somebody to move into that rather than just having somebody live in the house and pay my mortgage every month?
The good thing about a fix and flip is that when you do a fix and flip, you get a big return. For example, see, if you buy a house like for $30,000, $40,000, and then you put in $30,000 and then you're selling it for $150, close to $160, you're looking at a $41,000, almost $50,000 profit. That's why fixing and flipping is more profitable than wholesaling. Wholesaling is you get your money in 3 to 6 weeks, but you're not doing any of the work. You just literally collecting a check for finding the property. And whereas a landlord, it is steady income over time, as well as you paying down the mortgage. However, you're eventually going to own that home free and clear, and you have the equity in the house that you can do whatever you choose with the equity once you own that property.
Yeah. So do you find that as a person who's doing fix and flips, do you find that the way you get a lot of your wholesale is that maybe it's a property that you're not interested in, but you know people who are, or do you specifically go after certain properties for wholesaling and then certain properties for doing a fix and flip?
I go after certain properties based on my buyers. So I have a list of buyers that say, hey, Roxanne, I want these properties on this particular street in Baltimore or streets in Baltimore. And I just go out, look for it, go to either auctions, drive for dollars, which is you drive around the neighborhood. If for those of you who are in the Baltimore area, I do not recommend you drive in those streets at night. Better to drive the streets in the day around noon or 1, just depending on which part of Baltimore you're going into. But like if you're in Annapolis, I wouldn't say Chicago because there's some parts of Chicago that's not really good to drive at night. But, just if those areas like Annapolis, Severna Park, anywhere in Maryland that it's a safe area, you can drive it at night. Because what you're trying to do is determine what the area looks like. If it's too many cars on the street, is too many cars parked on the street, if you see trash. Those are things that if you're going to look at it, those are things that your buyer is going to look at. And if you literally have to do the assessment for them, they're not coming out there and doing all of it. That's why you do all of that. You kind of give them a little report of the area, like what you know about it, and get it to them so that they get a warm and fuzzy to trust you and give you their money.
Okay. So before we move on, I'm going to ask somebody in the chat if anybody in the chat would have a preference of having a detailed conversation about wholesaling versus doing the fix and flip. Just drop it in the chat. Let us know which one you would rather focus on, because I'm going to start with wholesaling, moving from fastest, lowest amount of money, and then moving up into the still kind of fast money, but a little bit more work, right? So going into the wholesaling, you talked about having a list of buyers and doing a little bit of scouting work for them. Can we back it up a little bit and just walk us through everything that you do? What goes into the entire process of making that $5,000 return? Where do we start? How do we walk it through? What is somebody going to have to do if they want to get into wholesaling, aside from going to a seminar and actually getting like the full mentoring and support?
So one of the things that I did was, since I wanted to invest in, because the three areas that I want to invest in right now is Baltimore, Annapolis, and Prince George's County. So what I did is I went to the gas station, I got a map of Baltimore, and literally got a highlighter of areas that I was interested in. I looked up these areas by the zip code. So what I did is I went into Trulia.com and I would type in the zip code. And what that does is it gave me how, like, a little crime rate, which is a little dark map. So it would say light blue is a good investment, dark blue, just be wary. I mean, you could buy the property, but just keep in mind you have a lot more going on. You have people stealing, robbing, all of the above. Anytime you go into the darker shades blue, it's not a good area to invest in. If you, for example, as I drive to Baltimore, if you see, let's say 15 houses boarded up and your house is not boarded up, just know that that's the problem. What you want to do is try to get rid of that property as quickly as you can. Because you can't really do much if the other homes aren't being renovated. Because if yours is renovated and none of the others are, best believe in a couple weeks or a month, your property is probably going to get vandalized.
Yeah.
If you're in a boarded up area.
So it almost like you have to have kind of long cash and just buy the whole block and fix up the whole block. But there's projects out there, there's people out there who have projects like that, but for a starting real estate investor, that's probably not the direction you want to go.
No, you don't want to actually start going into areas that that may be a money pit for you, especially when you're starting off new and you don't have the capital. That is not a great area to start. You would want to start in an area where you know that it's a good area, which is, like I said, you drive around and you can see, tell, and also you can talk to the people. They're very friendly at times, but you just have to have a technique of how you're going in there and how you're going to communicate. Because what I always do, I take one of my investment partners with me whenever we go into Baltimore, and he does all the talking and I just stand there with a clipboard.
Okay.
Like I'm taking notes. So it just looks like we're trying to assess what's going on in the area. Okay.
Now, talking about the wholesale side of this, do you go out and you find these homes and then you find a buyer for them? I've heard before with wholesaling, you don't have to have your own money. There's ways that you can get the house, but then not actually buy the house until you sell the house. And it's kind of a complicated thing. What does that look like?
Well, and I'll give you an example. Like whenever I'm buying a lot of my properties to wholesale, I'd get them at an auction. Most of the times the auctions are at least 5,000-10,000. So what I do is I reach out to the auctioneer and say, I'm interested in the property. Is the homeowner considering to just take a cash buyout, or do I have to come to the auction? So at that time, the auctioneer would let me know if the seller is willing to accept an offer or not willing to accept an offer. So that's one of the avenues that I use I use auctioneers for my wholesale properties.
Okay. And then, so do you go ahead and make that purchase, or do you get the house under contract? Do you just go ahead and you just give them the cash, you own it, and then what's the chances that you won't be able to sell it?
One of the things that I do is I look at the property, I reach out to my buyers, we have the conversation about the property, and what I would do is take my contractor down there. So my contractor is a Baltimore native. He knows Baltimore very well. So what he would do is advise me on if this is a good area to keep it, or this is a good area if it's not a good area where you could just make some money, and let that be someone else's problem.
Okay. So really you don't make a decision beforehand that, hey, I'm just getting this for wholesale. You're letting an expert let you know, hey, it's going to either cost too much to get this fixed up. You're not going to get the return on it, or whatever that is. As far as people who you would flip that to on a wholesale, I guess what I'm asking is, like, you do fix and flips, right? Are these other people who do fix and flips that you're wholesaling the property to? And why would they want it if you don't want it? I'm trying to figure this all out.
Well, see, that's the crazy part that I don't understand. A lot of my buyers, they just have it outlined by zip code. They like, okay, if you have a property in 21223, they was like, okay, give it to me. They are not really concerned with the condition at times. They're familiar with the area. They own other properties on that block. So a lot of times it's an investment for them. So it may be ugly to you, but it's a long-term investment for them, because a lot of times the buyers that I work with own a lot of properties either on that block or the block over. So as long as I can deliver, that's all they're concerned about.
Okay. So how do you get those buyers? How do you build up that list of people that are looking for properties in certain areas?
I've gone to REI meetings where I meet other individuals at REIs. I've gone to, it's a website that I actually paid for. It's called Private Money Gold Mine. It gives me a list of buyers that I can reach out to. What I have done is I've logged on there. I've emailed maybe 20 investors every day. And the ones who reach back out to me, I ask them what their criterias are, what areas they're looking for, and what would be the interest rate if I'm not trying to wholesale and I want to fix and flip, or if I want to buy and hold. They can actually finance the loan for you where you're not really coming out of the pocket in the beginning.
Okay, that works. So then they would, instead of going to a bank to get cash, you're just getting it short-term money from a private investor. Do they offer comparable interest rates? Do they offer higher rates, or?
They offer comparable interest rates. They've between 7 and 12%. I know that sounds high, but a lot of times that's based on how much you borrow. And I can give you a prime example. I purchased a house in Baltimore for $50K. I've done the rehab, and the resale is close to $175. Right now, normally I would have had to pay that loan off every month. But what the investor did is hold off all the payments until the end, and then he would add that if it was accruing interest every month, he would
Mm-hmm.
take out the interest at the end once the house is sold. So one of the things with fixing and flipping, you just make sure that when you're dealing with your investor, you have to ask those questions. Can you pay the payments at the end, or so forth and so you just have to let them know where you are and what you're working with.
Right. And so I think thinking about it from a standpoint of a typical mortgage, 30 years at 7% or 12%, somewhere in there, that's a lot of money. But thinking about what you just said, right? I'm borrowing 50,000 from you, and let's just say it's at 12%. And I'm going to be done with this renovation and I'm going to be selling the house within 6 months. So really, I'm not paying 12%, I'm paying 6% on that money. And that comes out to $3,000. So at the end of the time, I put 50 grand into it. I've got 3,000 in interest. I've got however much money that I invest in the rehab. Let's just call it another 50, right? And so now I've got 103,000 into it. I sell it for 175,000, and I'm making this huge profit back, right? So
Yeah.
$3,000 of interest on that in 6 months is not a lot at all.
No.
So, okay. I'm working through it in my head so that one of these days I'll be there. So that's really on the side of the fix and flip, though, when it comes to borrowing that money and holding it. But what about your buyers for the wholesale? Does that come from that same pool of people that you email to?
Yeah, because what I do is, one of the things that you want to do when you're building your buyers list, you want to interview your buyers just the same way they're interviewing you. You want to interview them and ask them the questions like, if I want to wholesale, would you be interested in that property? If I wanted to fix and flip, would you be interested in the property? If I wanted to buy and hold, would you finance me, let's say hypothetically, buy and hold for 5 years? Because if you're buying a house, and I'll just use Baltimore again, you buy the house for 30, you really don't need a 30-year loan. You can pay that off in a significant amount of time based on what your average rent is to the tenant.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Okay. So it really is about building those relationships on the front end, and then the deals come into an environment where you've already got people to connect with those deals.
Yes.
I was about to sneeze, but I didn't. Winning. All right. So you started out as a landlord. Talk to me about some of the trials and tribulations of that you went through. I know there are a lot of people such as myself. I bought my first house in Arkansas, about 3 minutes outside of the Air Force Base where I was working at the time. Company that I worked for moved us across the country. We still own that house. We rent it out because it's 3 minutes outside the Air Force Base. Now, we have used a property management company. They take a 10% fee for, collecting the rent, handling any repairs, and basically making sure that the tenants don't destroy the house. And then we get the rest of that rent money. Do you use management companies? Did you manage yourself? And well, I'll start with that, and then I have another question afterwards. So how did you do it?
Well, right now, since I only live 20 miles away, I manage it myself. I'm not really, since I'm only investing in the local area, I have not ventured out of state. Once I do, I will have a property management company, but right now it is just me. My tenants, I can say they're the greatest thing I've ever had. I have not had any issues. The good thing about it, I guess the husband is a handyman, so he fixes everything before even calling me. Even after I tell them not to, I'll fix it. So they don't really bother me with anything major. Like if the roof needs fixing, that is something I would do. The windows and the sliding doors, those are the things they will call me for. But like a leaking pipe, the husband does that. If the toilet's running, he does that. And I said, don't do that. I'll send someone to fix it. But they handle all the ins and outs. So I've been very lucky. I have not had a bad tenant.
Okay. Well,
I cannot really speak on any horror stories because I don't have any.
Yeah. But that's good. So even outside of the horror stories, what are some of the things that come along with managing your own property, though? Let's say you didn't have a tenant who was very proactive. For people who may just be moving out of that first house and they don't necessarily want to sell it, what would they need to look forward to, either in managing it themselves or getting a property manager? What are some of the things that come up with having tenants in your home as opposed to either being a homeowner or just, selling that thing?
Well, it's with the property management, one of the things you'd have to do is at least have a plan. If you know you're going to need a tenant in there, you need to at least start planning this 3 to 6 months in advance. Because one, you have to figure out who's going to pay that mortgage, especially if you're moving to another area where you're most likely going to pick up another mortgage or an apartment. So you have to look at where your funds are coming from. And two is I had my real estate agent do the background check and the pre-screening for me. So all that was done. I got to review all the applications. They had to write a bio or literally a letter onto why I should allow them to live there. And I interview each and every individual who wanted to rent my property. And if I was happy with what I felt, and a lot of it for me was, if I get a good feeling about you, I'll let you stay.
Okay.
It was not happening. And I got a really good vibe about them when I first met them.
That's always a good thing. Yeah. So we went straight to property manager because we were going to be all the way across the country. And, I know that there's a lot of things when it comes to renting out a property. You're not allowed to discriminate based on this thing or that thing, right? If I had my choice, my tenants would be in the military. But since a property manager is managing it and they're the ones vetting the tenants, I didn't get military tenants. I just got local area tenants, which in my property, I'm dealing with that. And it's very frustrating because a lot of months I get my rent check very shortly before I need to pay the mortgage, right? They don't pay at the beginning of the month where they're supposed to. I go home to visit and I drive by my property and the yard doesn't look good. There's a hole in one of the windows to the garage. And I know that if I had a military family in there, I could just call a commander, right? And they would fix things. But dealing with just regular old civilians out there and a management company that's dealing with all these other things, there's a lot of things that I haven't been able to do that I wish I was able to do if I just had a military person in there. I know a way to make them do what they need to do, right? And I also know they're constantly going to be getting a check because they're under contract.
Well, one thing I want to mention is that you may have to either get rid of that property management company or tell them these are your guidelines and expectations, because normally the property management company works for you. You don't work for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not giving you the military tenants that you want, then, let them know, hey, I may have to let you guys go because these are the requirements that I'm looking for. And you can change that. So that's one of the reasons, like when I started looking for a property management company, I really was not happy with what I was hearing. The services that they were going to provide did not meet the standards that I was looking for. So I just decided, you know what, I'm only 20 miles away. I'll just drive up there and manage it myself. And it has been great. And just the idea of me showing up, my tenants don't really like me showing up there on an app. So it's just that your tenants know who you are, and my tenants know who I am. And what you talked about, the check, I get the check a week before the mortgage is due. So it's due on the 1st. I get it like on the 25th or something like that. But I get it a week prior to the mortgage being due.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to get mine at as close to the beginning of the month as possible, just so, because I get nervous. Like, all right, am I going to have to pull from our funds in order to cover this? I'd prefer not to. So the closer it gets to when my mortgage is due and I'm still waiting on that check in the mail, I'm like, look, now, not trying to go through this. But those things being said, I appreciate us having this conversation because, like I said, there have been a lot of people who wanted to know more about real estate, especially from the perspective of somebody who's just kind of getting into it. I want to go back to talking about that seminar because that's a real sticking point for a lot of people. We see the seminars that say, hey, come through this. Not only will I teach you how to do it, but I'll give you access to all of these resources. And we just don't know, as folks who aren't in the real estate business, just how many resources there are out there and how important those things are to being successful in real estate. So talk to me a little bit about why you chose to go through the seminar and really the value that it gave to you to help you get started on this road. Because, I mean, you've been in it really for about a year now. I mean, I know you got your first property, 4 or 5 years ago, but really over the last year, you've been ramping up. And it seems like, I mean, you talk like an old pro. So you had to get something out of it. Talk to us about the value of making that initial investment.
It was very, very valuable to me. To be honest, I really did not want to drop that $20,000. It really irked me inside out. I really felt sick to my stomach when I had to give him the check. But over time, for the time that I had with the coaches and everything that I've gotten out of it, like the training, the advice, talking to my coach with every deal, doing the formula with my coach, looking at the properties with my coach, having a good team, which is like your real estate agent, a real estate attorney, your contractor, your title company. These are the closest people that you need in your group, and you have to have a good mentor. When you have these people with you, you can do anything in real estate. But the one thing about real estate is you may think you have a bad deal, and it may be a bad deal, but you gotta stay positive because when the deals go south, it automatically kills your inspiration. It kills everything inside of you, and then you're second guessing yourself on whether if this was a good choice, was it worth spending the money? Whereas working at it, talking to people, getting 50 no's until you get that yes. I mean, that is hard to deal with. I mean, I've dealt with it in my first year. I was getting no, 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 no. And now some of those people who told me no have called me back and now want to sell their house to me.
Okay.
So it's just some things, you just have to, if they tell you no, dust your shoulders off and just go after the next house.
How long did it take you before you recouped the financial cost of that initial investment?
I will recoup it when I sell the house because I did fix and flip. I just started wholesaling.
Okay.
Fix and flipping was more comfortable for me because I was transitioning from a landlord to fix and flip. And now that I'm comfortable and understand what it takes to fix and flip, I started the wholesaling.
Got it. Okay. So you've got a property that's ready or that's getting ready to hit the market. Once that property sells, that first property sells, the entire initial investment is back. And then everything after that is gravy.
Yes. And actually it's twice. So I invested 20, I'm about to make 50.
What? Okay. I like it. That's beautiful. So before we close everything out, one question, what haven't I asked you about getting into this real estate business that I should have? What is something that people really need to know?
Well, you didn't ask how does it work? Like, how do you start? Because like one of the things you have to do is find the deal. Once you find that deal, you have to work your numbers. You have to know what your after repair value is. You're going to look at what is it times. It's times 70 minus your repairs would give you the market value of how much that investor is going to make on that property. I know that's one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand how this formula works. And it is such an amazing thing. Once you get the numbers, everything will follow.
Okay. Walk me through it real quick. So how on the surface, what does that formula look like? I'm a nerd. I like doing math.
So it's ARV times, and we'll just use 70%, subtract repairs equals MAO, which is maximum allowed offer. So your ARV is your after repair value.
Okay.
And so the next part of this equation is the buyer's price, subtract your desired profit, is equal to your wholesaler MAO.
All right. So let me read those back. So the first equation is after repair value times 0.7 minus your repairs equals your maximum acceptable offer.
Maximum allowed offer.
Allowed offer. What does that mean? What does maximum allowed offer mean?
That's the max that the buyer or anybody will be willing to purchase the property for.
Okay. After all the repairs have been done?
That's right.
Okay. Or wait.
No.
Before the repairs are done.
That's before the repairs is done.
All right. So I'm looking at the comps in this neighborhood, and I'm looking at that to kind of give me an after repair value. I'm taking whatever that comparable price average is. I'm making it times 0.7 to give me the 70%. So then I take the 70%, and then the estimate of repairs I'm going to get from my contractor.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so then I take the estimate of repairs I get from the contractor, and I subtract that from my 70% of the expected after market value. And that is the maximum amount of money that I should be offering anybody to buy this house from them.
Yes, when you're wholesaling.
Okay.
And the reason being is that, you want to make sure that your buyer is willing to buy the property for that, because a lot of times the buyers that you work with, they will also look into the property as well and assess that what you're giving them is, what the property is going to be worth once they've done all the repairs and it's ready to be sold.
Okay. And so then the other side to that is I'm making an offer for this property and I get it at that price. I want to make a certain amount of profit on that property, which means that I need to set my price to the buyer so that what's left in the middle is my desired profit.
That's correct.
So that seems like a much simpler equation. It's really just, okay, so I made an offer on this property for $15,000 and I bought it for $15,000. I know I want to make $7,000 on the property. So at the very minimum, I'm going to need to have a buyer buy it for $22,000.
That's right.
Quick and simple. So what about closing costs and things like that? Do you have to deal with all that stuff when you're doing wholesale and all that?
That the buyer eats that cost.
Okay. So, okay.
That's why wholesaling is so much. Most people like doing wholesaling because they're not responsible for the title fees or any of that. The buyer is going to take all of that. And once you write your contracts, The buyer is aware that they're paying all these costs. And the same thing with the seller. The seller is going to think that you're buying it, but you have an end buyer.
Right.
Which is when that time comes to go to the settlement table, you tell the seller that this is your partner, and he's basically buying your house. And a lot of times the seller don't care as long as they get their money.
Right, absolutely. And the whole thing with that, because I've had this conversation with people before who were like, well, then why wouldn't the seller just sell it to that buyer at that cost? And now you're taking a profit, this, that, and the other. And the way I look at that is this person would probably be sitting on that house, either paying a mortgage or the value constantly going down, or maybe it's a house that they inherited from somebody that they're never going to do anything with. And they have a life, right? They're not in the real estate business. They never, ever, ever would have found that buyer. The fact that you were there to be that conduit between the person who needed to get rid of a house and a person who's really wanting to invest in a house, there's value there. That profit you make in the middle is the value of creating the connection between those two people who needed to get rid of a house and who needed to buy a property in that area. So there's actual work you're doing there. There's actual value you're adding to both parties. And in the middle of it, you're taking your profit. Now, would you agree with that, or is there some other things associated with it as well?
No, I would agree with that. And for those who've asked you that question, they need to look at the equation like this. What does a real estate agent do? All the real estate agent does is bring the buyer together with the seller, and they take a percentage of the transaction. You're not a licensed real estate agent, but you are bringing the buyer and the seller to the table, and you're getting it for a fee. So the same way agents bring the buyer and the seller together, you're doing it, you're just not licensed.
Yeah, you're doing it off market before anybody goes and lists their house in the MLS. You're going out and finding those distressed properties, or those people who maybe the bank wouldn't finance this home because it's in a certain situation. And so all those folks who can't go through the regular system, you're going out and you're helping them to do the same type of transactions. This is wonderful. All right. So that was a huge, really important thing that I just completely forgot to ask. Is there anything else that I haven't asked that I should have that we need to know?
Well, what I would like to know if we could do, Jared, if we can maybe have a second meeting, and we can probably go a little bit more in depth in real estate, because there are so many things that people should know about. And I know a lot of people get wary when they think about finding buyers, building their buyers list, building their team, and just understanding the process. I think people may have a warm and fuzzy once they know or have a better understanding on how to better do the business or the transaction.
Okay, I'm going to put that out to the audience. So for those of you who are listening now, is that something that you would be interested in joining us for, a separate training session on how to go more in depth into the basics of getting started in real estate? You can drop that response in the chat. For those of you who are listening to the podcast on the replay through the podcast's directories, if you can just send me an email, gerald@buyblackpodcast.com. It's gerald@buyblackpodcast.com. And you can very simply in the email just put the word yes if you would be interested in being a part of a more in-depth training with Roxanne. I know I'm going to go ahead and it was a little check mark I did there, a yes for me. So we'll move forward through this conversation, and then we'll wait and get the feedback from everybody else on how interested they would be in having that further training. Torin has jumped into the chat immediately, and he's yes. So we've definitely got some folks who'd be interested in that. Closing out the conversation we have today, there's always a few questions I like to ask at the end of the show, just to get to know a little bit more about you. The first one is, what is the biggest challenge that you have ever faced, and how did you overcome it, or what did you learn from it?
One of the biggest challenges that I face, and I still continue to face, is that being a woman in this business, a lot of times when you're talking with your contractors who are men, they sometimes doubt what you're telling them or what you're asking them. So a lot of times for those women who are getting in, you just have to stay firm, stand your ground, be respectful, but just get your point across. That's just one of the things that I deal with, and I still deal with it. I just learned that I need to just continue to grow as an individual and just not take it personal.
I like it. Awesome. Next, what is your favorite tool? What's the tool that you use the most to help you run your business and save you time, money, and energy?
Well, my favorite tool is prayer. I literally, I get up and I pray every morning before I start my day. I'm up at 3 a.m., which is very early, but that's the first thing I do. I talk to God and I just thank him for everything. And I just ask him to guide my steps and give me the strength to do my job, do my real estate, and continue to write children's books.
I love it. I love it. And so that brings us to a reminder question of, if people want to get their hands on The Choice for their children, tell us again, where can we find it?
They can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Right now, Amazon, you can get it in paperback as well as Kindle format. And we're also getting ready to launch it in the Audible, which should be next week. And that's where you can find it. You can find me on Twitter at Hazel Walcott. You can find me on Facebook at Hazel Walcott, The Choice. And that's where you can find out the book, and you can reach me via my social media outlets.
Love it. And then the question about real estate. Again, for everybody, shoot that email to me and just say yes if you would be interested in getting a further training from Roxanne on real estate. But if people wanted to reach out to you directly, is that something that you would be willing to entertain when it comes to Half Car Solutions?
Yes, what they can do is go to halfcarsolutions.com, go into the seller or the buyer list, or just reach out and just send me a comment or a note, and I'll respond back to them. I'll talk to them one-on-one, and if they're in the Maryland area, I'll be more than happy to meet with them. I'll even be willing to take them on any of the deals that I'm working on if they're in the Maryland area.
I love it. That is awesome. That is called supporting the community. So with that, I've got one final question, and I always ask to end the show. What is your number one piece of advice for our listening community as a whole?
My number one piece of advice is just stay true to yourself. Don't ever let anybody change you. If you're weird and quirky and that makes you happy, just do you, be you, and just be happy with yourself. There are always going to be people that are always going to be telling you, you need to change this, you need to change that. Just take a look in the mirror and say, nothing's wrong with me. It's not me, it's them. But just always remember, stay true to yourself.
That's perfect. That is wonderful advice. Well, Roxanne, thank you so much for joining me for this show. It has been a great conversation, and I will get in touch with you once I get the feedback from everybody, and maybe we'll put together a nice little training session that people can opt into so they can learn more about your process for doing real estate.
All right. Thanks, Gerard.
No problem. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. That is it for episode number 72 of Buy Black Podcast. We are out. Folks, if you did not have your pen and paper handy while you were listening to that episode, make sure you go back and sit down with a notepad and take notes on all the things that Roxanne was talking about, especially when she was talking about how to decipher whether or not you've got a good deal sitting in front of you, and how to decide what to offer if you do want to purchase a property. It was such a good show, and I really appreciate it. Now, as we talked about in there, Roxanne is willing to do a free training event for anybody who's interested, so that we can come back together and give you even more details about how you can get started and purchase your first real estate property. If you are interested in making that happen, send me an email, gerald@buyblackpodcast.com, and it just needs to say yes. If I get enough of those emails, and we'll call it number 10, If I get 10 emails from you guys that say, yes, you want to have a separate free training event with Roxanne for Buy Black Podcast listeners, then we are going to put it together. We're going to make it happen and we'll get you invited. All right. Now, aside from that, I wanted to give you a quick reminder. I do already have another training event that is going to be happening later this month. Again, it is a training event for my business owner assessment called From Self-Employed to CEO. How close are you? If you want to be a part of that free training session, one happening on January 23rd, another on January 26th, then you need to go to dopebusinessplan.com/IWantIn. That's IWANTIN, and just register there for the training event. And you're going to be able to join me and the other participants and learn about all the different gaps that you may have in your business and your business model that keep you held hostage and don't give you the opportunity to take time off and feel good about it, to step away from the business and spend time with your family and still keep making money. We're going to get those things fixed. We're going to get you on the right track. Sign up for that free training event. And that is it for today, folks. Thank you for joining me, and we will talk to you in the next episode.